What is going on, everybody? 'Tis I, the enigma of the gun airwaves, Miyanovich, welcoming you to Season 3 of the Liberal Gun Owners Lens podcast, where unprecedented perspectives are packed into the cargo hold for the LGO Lens spaceship Voyagio.
That's fucking Italian.
Don't believe that evolution is possible with guns and public safety in America? It's already happening, y'all. Minds are evolving. Think guns versus public safety is the only game in town, do ya? Think culture war is the big boss, do ya? Then keep your ass in the past. Everyone else, all aboard! The concepts that we're dealing with in the Mang Dojo podcast. Okay. This podcast, I would say, has less interest in doing things that I think are important, but not quite nuanced enough. And what do I mean by that? So we're both left of center. What might one of our tendencies be? It would be when we analyze situations, we're trying to be fully inclusive of all people and be universalist about all things and attempt to, because we're all more alike than we are different, to just universalize everything, that we are going to talk about everything the same for a man, a woman, a non-binary person, a tall person, a dwarf. We're going to say everybody's equal. Mm-hmm. Everybody has equal capacity. Everybody's the same. So when we want to empower people in their rationale or in their dealing with emerging crises of authoritarianism or whatever, we're going to want to be like, we're all in this together. We're all the same. But here's the reality. We are also not all the same. Mm-hmm. We all don't have the same capacities. And there are differences in people relative to many different things, from mm-hmm. culture to upbringing, right, to their sex or gender. There are many differences. And we need to talk about those differences also, in addition to always universalizing, mm-hmm. because we want to make sure everybody is included, right? So this is a podcast for men. And although we have female guests and we'll have non-binary people and all that stuff, one of the things that I brought up relative to this election mm-hmm. was on the other podcast is the lack of leadership in the Democratic Party mm-hmm. and the lack of leadership center to left in general. Because it's a paradigm of collectivism, there's a lot of neutering, that's the term I'll use, neutering people, in my observation, so that groupthink is maximized and potentially important, innovative individual thinking is minimized. We are inside of a culture that punishes people based on purity tests and gatekeeping, which is another potential neutering force. And so what this shows me is the thing we started to talk about in the beginning, which is humans love to psychologically respond mm-hmm. to the person that looks like they know it all and have the power. Well, we don't have that, generally speaking. We don't have a figure like that. We don't have figures like that to even manipulate our side, if that were to be the root, because we neuter the situation away from it into collectivism. But the problem for me is that neutering has gotten so bad that we have no real leadership. And I mean no real leadership. I don't care who the leader is, male, female, gender non-binary, doesn't matter. There is no real leader here. And this is one of the reasons why Donald Trump is in office. And it's one of the reasons why I just saw today on MSNBC, there was a piece on there's no real countering happening. There's no real potent countering mm-hmm. from the Democratic Party in the Beltway. There's no countering. They're not really responding to a boatload of crazy bullshit. So both Donald Trump's in the White House and there's no countering to this onslaught mm-hmm. of ridiculousness. It's not fucking rocket science. The Democratic Party does not have leaders, and that is because the center to left reality is now inside of a pernicious, mm-hmm. weird, self-defeating state. And so, and no leadership or no real leadership also is going to mean men, because no matter what you think or I think men are going to be a part of the leadership equation, whether we're trying to universalize that or not. The dominant positions of power are with men in male psychology. There is a male psychology, right? At least in part. And in 4 years, that's going to be a fact. And in 8 years, that's going to be a fact. So in the right now of being effective, having males who are good, strong leaders, center to left, is kind of what we're talking about. So to address the issues, we need to address the root, in my opinion. And my opinion is we're inside of a culture that, because we're sensitive to knowing the downside of toxic masculinity and how that still plays over on the right side of the political spectrum, we are sensitive to that and we don't want that. But where that translates into is a complete neutering campaign when you get to the level of the collective culture. It's not allowing strong people, specifically strong men, to step forward and say, this is bullshit, this is unacceptable, or I want to run against this person. Like, I wouldn't consider Joe Biden to be that kind of a strong vector. Obama maybe, but generally speaking, we don't have that kind of a personality. And I would say the political reality also is a part, just the general political reality is a neutering reality. There's so many thoughts I have, and I want to let you talk. The other thing is Donald Trump is also not a good leader. He's also not a real force of masculine fucking power for real. He just projects like he is. And Elon Musk certainly is not. So what I see is across the board, a lack of, how do I want to say it? Quality men, good men, moral, good men, right? With balls and spine and capacity. I see that. And in my opinion, we need that. We need all the other things too. But this is a podcast about maleness.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that kind of ballpark assessment that I just gave?
I'm gonna, if I were to behave like your average leftist, liberal or Democrat, I would attack you for your lack of inclusivity in this podcast.
Of course.
But, I mean, jokes apart, like that's a big part of the problem. Like you're saying, I agree wholeheartedly with the fact that, the Democratic Party has been more worried about, projecting the perfect virtue rather than the practical ones, right? And, the whole cannibalizing our own side, like the gatekeeping and virtue signaling is so strong sometimes it slaps you in the face. And what that does, it actually alienates the people that want to do stuff, because you have to push through the resistance from the other side and the resistance from your own side, which is it's oftentimes more cutting, right? And to me is some of the crux of the issues, right? When you're talking about the lack of principle characters on the Democratic side, the person that will drive with passion the party, kind of like what Trump is doing on the conservative side. I don't know that, like, it seems to me that it's kind of almost by design, right? In the sense that the old school of the political part of the Democratic Party is so out of touch with the new school of progressive and good liberals and so on and so forth, that they're shooting themselves in the foot more often than not, right? There are pretty awesome people that could be leader in the Democratic Party, right? Male and female, right? I don't remember names now, but like when you see people standing up and do the congressional hearing, like you have those people. But even like, remember like how Bernie and what's her name? The
Elizabeth Warren?
Yeah. When they were like, basically they were riding an upswell of support, especially from the younger Democrats, right? And all of a sudden it was like, switch and bait. We got Biden and dude, like like you could see, like, you know, in the news and everything, like you see the support, right? And then they were put to the side.
Sure.
So you're building leaders that are not 100% in line with the party, and then you destroy them, right? Because they were not going to play the corporate games that, you know, these leaders may be more prone to play. So on the big picture, I think that was a big shift and a big delusion for a lot of the younger generations that are more on the progressive side and so on. And then what they do, they attack their own side, right? That's the other thing. Like, I'll give you an example. Like, I'm so frustrated by all the comedians, you know, nowadays that even if they're more on the liberal side and progressive, like they make fun of the woke, the super woke, right? The barista with the earrings and the overreacting about anything, right? And I'm like, yeah, that's funny. And that frustrates me, that virtue signaling in left and so on frustrates me. But like, if you have in your society, if you have freaking Nazis over here and woke baristas over here, why the fuck you making fun of the baristas and not the Nazi, right? What the heck is that with, you know, you don't see one freaking conservative comedian making fun of the Nazis. They make fun of the wokes, right? Well, we make fun of our own. And like, dude, either you don't have the moral courage to actually make fun of the people that need to be made fun of, or you're stuck in your own little world, right? And in both cases, you're not bringing the cause forward, if you will, right? So that lack of leaders on our side, I think that it's a problem that needs to be solved, you know, and they need to solve it by, with my modicum of understanding, or like, the Democratic Party is still too focused on making the old school Democrats happy and not the new, right? And why so many people didn't go to vote? Many reasons, right? I do believe that a lot of them didn't go to vote, not because they didn't realize that Trump was like, you know, trash, but because they felt betrayed by their own side. They felt like, you know, you're not fighting up, you're not, you know, there. And so it is a very important topic to discuss, to bring forward. Like, you know, why are the squad, right, which are the most extreme Democrats, having so much success and support in the younger generation? Like, ask yourself that, right? Why, after 8 years where, you know, your side has been buying more guns than anybody else, you're still putting somebody that is 100% anti-guns as the chairman or vice chairman of the Democratic Party? Like when you drink your own Kool-Aid to the level that you cannot discern your belief from the belief of the public are evolving, you're doing yourself a disservice, and ultimately you're going to do your party and your people a disservice. You know, on the one side there is a lack of empathy. On the other side there is overstock on empathy, right? And it's not now you're focusing on breaking everything down so that, you know, society is never going to be perfect. Life is never going to be perfect. So you're going to take your win with your losses and, you know, and compromise to move our society forward. When you don't want to compromise, you're not going to be effective unless you're the side that wants to non-compromise and become a dictator, right? Because that's the thing, like you're saying, we don't need to find the perfect leader, right? You don't need to, we need to find somebody that actually can project that, can project confidence, can project, you know, that leadership that people are seeking, right? And when we talk about leadership, obviously, you know, we prefer somebody that leads by example, somebody that leads, you know, with their action and words first, right? And so it's a lot harder to find a leader that can stand up to that. Like, you know, I think, you know, like Obama was really able to galvanize people because it turns out he's actually the person that he says he is, right? I don't agree 100%. I thought it could have been different. You know, don't, you know, I don't put anybody on a platform, right? It's like, he did the best job because he was the best person in that office for a while, right? Like, and his family life, you know, reflects that. His life after the president reflects that. During the president reflects that, right? So, but then, you know, when he moved on, the void was not filled, right? And again, you got to figure out whether it is because the people that have the power that want to relinquish it to junior members and so on. But there are a few people that could actually bring it together better. And then again, I'm still, the ultimate test is like, why are we so, well, I understand why, like so prone to shoot member of our own side down is because weak people get value by bringing other people down if they not, excel themselves, right? So it is really like, it's a little bit disheartening in a sense, because again, we're looking for people of character in order to be able to have a leader of character. But just now, when you were talking about this, like it's kind of like the Republican have the same virtue signaling and purity test, but it works for them because they want an authoritarian figure. They want a Jesus. They want a daddy, right? And so, how the MAGA got in power was by denying anybody outside of there, So if you're not MAGA enough, you don't get voted in. Like kind of like on our side, if you're not liberal enough, we're going to find something, right? And so those mechanisms are very similar on both sides, but for one side it has worked,
yes,
and for the other it hasn't.
Yeah. If there's a purity test over on the MAGA side, and they say you're not MAGA enough, so you don't belong on election day, those that weren't included in the MAGA gatekeeping move will still vote in that direction anyway. They'll vote for Donald Trump anyway. On our side, a lot of people will still do that. If you're not woke enough, they'll still vote on our side, but also they won't. Idealists will not go to the polls for many different reasons. But I do think it's important I think one of the sticking points, which does relate to leadership, which to me does relate to maleness also. Like, I'm not really interested in just every time universalizing it. It's all of us. There's a difference with male psychology, and it does certain things good, well, better than female psychology. And there are certain things that female psychology is better at. But within 98% of psychological operation, we're basically the same. But harnessing and actually dealing with and talking about the male aspect of this outside of all males are toxic, outside of the only way that we consider males is by saying white male patriarchy, outside of, this is one of the reasons why we're not optimized, is because these general mythologies get a chance to take hold, and they do influence what goes on. And what I'm seeing is, over the past 5 years, more and more males inside of our reality getting sick of it. Not because they're toxic, and not even because they're anti-woke, but because even if you're a non-toxic male and you're pretty reasonably woke, you're going to get pissed on because you're not saying shit like white male patriarchy all the time, all men are toxic. And you are also, you're basically just not shutting the fuck up about maleness. You're basically not allowed to say, there are things about me that are male and my friends who are also male that matter because we're males. That also matters, whether it's financial issues or middle-aged men with suicide or whatever it is. There are men, significantly that grow less and less enthused about what's going on because of the hyper wokeness, because of the hyper purity testing. And so I'm saying that is one example of why it's really easy as a liberal to just look at Washington, D.C. and go, they're the problem. It's really easy to look at the conservatives and go, they're the problem, because there are fucking Nazis or fascistes or Christo-fascists. It's real easy to do that. And there are those things. But one of the things that we don't do, which is one of the reasons I would say why Donald Trump is in the White House also, is we're so focused on other that we don't point the finger at ourselves. We don't ever go, what are our fucking weaknesses? How are we engaging in this shooting ourselves in the foot? Right? So it's not just the Democratic Party shooting themselves in the foot because they're not supporting this wave of young people with Bernie, which when you shit on Bernie and you don't listen to those people, you shoot yourself in the foot somewhat. That's true. But how are the people shooting themselves in the foot? Why are we so protective of ourselves? Just because there are Nazis and the Democratic Party shitting the bed, why are we so averse to looking at how we contribute to this from the standpoint of the people? Because the hyper wokeness and the hyper policing is fucking up. And that's not coming from Washington, D.C. That's coming from quote unquote us. That's driving people out, right? There's woke is a great thing. Pernicious woke is not, right? There's an aspect of it that's highly cancerous and it's fucking things up also. It's not just that there are Nazis, right? It's not just that the Democratic Party is a bunch of milk toasties. Those are also real. Those things are all real for sure. But the other thing is real is we have a pernicious neutering force. And when I say neutering, I don't just mean like neutering the balls off of men. What I mean is everybody has that go get 'em yang energy power inside of them. A woman has it. Transgender person has it. Man has it. And if you neuter that, you're fucking your own side badly. And that can cost you elections. So this is what I'm talking about. In the classic Jungian sense, Carl Jung, that is classic emasculation and classic shadow side play for people who, you just brought this up a minute ago, for what Jung would consider the feminine side of energy, which is introverted people who are traumatized, who perhaps they don't spend as much time out in the world on the grass. Perhaps they spend a maximized amount of time in the digital reality because it's safer. These are people with pain and trauma and expectations for how the world should be. They don't feel like they have any power, but they have all of these things on the inside. Confusion and pain and hurt. Well, they're not going to stand up and go over to where the Trumpers live and dump that all on those people. And it needs to come out somewhere. Otherwise, these, the hyper wokes are not going to, they're going crazy over it. So where is it going to dump out? In the proximate environment right around them, the people they talk to, the people they're online with, the people on their own side. This is all psychology 101. We already know we already know why all this shit happens, but it's playing out in a nuclear version with the internet and the primitive brain. And so this is why I feel the need to bring up masculine energy and feminine energy in the Jungian sense, right? Because again, we all have masculine and feminine inside of us, right? Transgender person, masculine, feminine, doesn't matter. It could be a lesbian, masculine, feminine. This is classical feminine side, not good feminine energy, shadow energy, right? So, we are neutering ourselves. And it's one of the reasons why Trump is in office. And it's okay for us to say, hey, we're neutering ourselves. And there are these fucking Nazis doing Sieg Heils on TV. Like, it's okay for us to say both. So my question is, I don't have the answer to it, but how does one start to address that and without being able to, in addition to analyzing and criticizing the other side, without criticizing ourselves? How can we do that?
Yeah, no, that would be insincere at best, right? And self-defeating at worst. Because like you said, I think a lot of people sat out this election because of that, right? So my first response, based on my own outlook and personality, if you will, is like I see the hyper woke, right? And I understand how it is frustrating, right, and all of that. But I think a lot of people. So you know how the trope on the right is like, oh, this liberal make us feel less than. They want to make us feel less than. They want to make us feel like we're more ignorant. They're going to make us feel this or that, right? So newsflash: nobody can make you feel more or less than. It's you, right? It's how you see yourself and how those external input affect that, right? So in the same sense, if somebody gets so incensed by the hyper woke that they potentially sit out a very important election, it's your own weakness that make you do that, right? The hyper woke person cannot make you feel like you're a racist or like you're a gender bias or anything like that. If you're confident in your own self, those two outliers shouldn't affect you, right? The problem is that a lot of people are not confident in themselves. If I say confident, like I am confident in myself because I know my faults as well as my good traits, if you will, right? And I'm okay living with my faults because I'm kind of working on them, and you know, and you know, just I don't judge anybody else by any higher standard than I judge myself, right? So I can keep it like, okay, I got to work on this, I'm going to work on that. And I can see excessive behavior in others as their own failure. So we need to work on that. But I think that saying, well, you know, the hyper woke made me, you know, sit out this election or whatever, it's, in my mind, in my opinion, you need to work on yourself because you're showing weakness, right? And you're showing weakness by projecting like you're not. Right? Oh, I'm not going to have somebody tell me, what can I say? What can I say? Right? Yeah, me neither. I don't make a big deal about it. Right? Like, and you know, even with my friends and so on, I'm working on different things and stuff like that. Right? To me, it really becomes about cultivating your own self, knowing your own self, and then you can actually be a more positive impact on society, have a more positive impact on society. Right? But it is frustrating, like, because, you know, we talked about it, especially because we're both involved in the liberal gun culture and so on, and there is so much frustration there. Like, you know, I mean, we can write encyclopedia about the gatekeeping and the purity test, and it pisses me off when I encounter, but I confront it, you know, and I take my licks and I move on, and I take my wins and I move on, right? But like, I'm not gonna let it cower me. Right, and I'm not because like a lot of these people use purity test and gatekeeping as a means to maintain their own power, their own righteousness, their own narrative in their own head. Right, so I'm better than because I've seen this nuance, you know, and you didn't, so I'm more. No, you're just manipulating. You're using what should be sincere feelings of empathy and compassion, and you weaponize those in order to put down the people around you, right? So that, to me, that's why I frankly, if that's your behavior, I don't care about you. Like, right? I see that what you're telling me is tinged, right? It's like, you know, if a MAGA calls me woke, or if a hyper woke calls me toxic, I don't give a damn either way, right? Like, thank you for, you know, showing me where your weakness is, right? There is a saying, like a Mexican proverb that I learned a while ago, and it basically translated is like, show me what you're boasting about, and I'll tell you where your weaknesses are. It's all that, right? Dude, somebody that, you know, and it's on both sides, right? So it's very frustrating, but it is human nature. And I think that sometimes we give the hyper woke too much power, right? We complain about that because, you know, on our side, everybody complains about the fascists. So, you know, so we complain about that because the fascist, you're a fascist. It makes me feel better about myself because I'm not. I'm a person that enjoys democracy, compassion. I want freedom and success, not just for me, for everybody else, right? So I'm already feel better than you. You're a liberal that could be, you know, actually a challenge to my own self-image. And so you're more dangerous to my ego than the fascist. So I'm attacking you, right? And so if you exhibit the level of weakness, I don't care what you have to say about me, bro. Like, you know what I mean? And it's, but unfortunately, because of a lot of the opinion expressed and so on, are tied to our ego, to how we view ourselves, then people get, you know, they take that criticism and they want to make it right, for themselves first and for everybody else. And that now you have those escalations of mortal verbal combat about a comma, right? Well, all this BS is going on, right? Like what? Like, why? But the problem is that also it's natural when you feel attacked to want to defend yourself and respond, right? And so much time and energy is wasted on these intertribal things, and it's kind of frustrating because, like, on our side, that's how we got Trump, because we weren't able to build enough groundswell support for our candidates. And on the other side is how they got Trump, because the decent Republicans weren't able to muster enough support to go against this guy, right? So the mechanisms are very similar. We are just, the gasoline for those mechanisms is slightly different, But and when we look at it, again, we need to talk about it from the male perspective, because by percentage, so far there are still more male in Congress than female, right? There is still more male in the army, in the police, in whatever, right? And we know that we are more susceptible to be manipulated through ego, diminishing or aggrandizing, right? And so we need to understand that, because especially in the States, like it's, worldwide, but in the States, going back to the mythology, right? Man should be self-sufficient, self-reliant, not show emotion, this and that. Like the whole thing that, women are emotional and men are not. Is anger not an emotion? Because I see a lot of that, in the male part of society, right? So because the standard for the mid is so high, so many people feel less than, and now they're going to respond to the narratives of leaders that make them feel artificially more than, right? The old, was it Johnson when he said, like, in order to convince if you can convince a poor white man that is better than the best black man, they not only for you, but they empty their pocket for you, right? So it's all about that on both sides, right? Like one makes you feel better than this, one makes you feel better than that. But it is that insecurity about your position in society, about your ability to fulfill your duty as a man and all that, that foster, what's the word I'm looking for? Foster a authoritarian leader. Right? Because again, when we go back, and I'm not psychologist, but when you look at it, if we break it down, how many people does it exhibit, toxic trait of masculinity had a poor relationship with their father? How many people that had a poor relationship with their fathers voted for the authoritarian figure, right? And again, like, it's a stark difference about the male and female psyche on that, right? And so we need to, I think, start a conversation of there is not one ideal of male, right? It's not the pioneer conquering nature or the civil rights warrior, making everything right? There is always a balance, is a spectrum of all these things, right? And so we need to understand that in order to be a good, valid, and valuable individual, you don't need to be the best at everything or at anything. You need to be able to fulfill your needs and your family's needs in a positive manner, right? And if you can't, we need to change the narrative where, like, not to give people the opportunity to fail, right? Because nobody, going towards failure is not going to make anything better, but giving people the leeway to feel happy that they are trying. Like, if you're trying a business venture and you fail, it's not necessarily a a bad mark on you, right? Because there is a lot of things that come into play. Like, you're starting a business and then there is a pandemic and you go under, right? Or you're starting a business, but you're not good at marketing or you're not good at, and so you fail. But understand this, if you show up to work every day, you're trying to provide for your family, right? If you have a bit more capacity, more skill, and you try to, to better yourself and you succeed, awesome. We never succeed on our own and we never fail on our own, right? So whether you succeed or fail is not really the value number next to you, to your self-worth, to your worth as a member of society. And we need to be able to educate that into people, right? Like it's one of the things that when I talk to people and so on, and is like, again, like with a bit of introspection, most people can figure out what they do well, what they're good at, and what they need to work on, right? And you can put me in a room with anybody. I don't feel inferior to people, and I don't feel superior to people. What I mean is, you put me in a room with a bunch of Nobel laureate, like I have a lot to learn, and I know that I have a lot to learn. And the fact that they're better than me at their specialty doesn't make me feel less than, right? By the same token, when people come to my classes and I teach to them, I don't feel better than them because I know my shit and they don't, because that guy is a doctor, that guy is the best like plumber in the world, that guy just wrote a book, right? So yeah, you're not as good as me in this, and I'm not as good as you in that, right? And so that's why I can maintain a level of self value even with my many faults and shortcomings, right? And the people that may not be able to allow for their own faults, they're going to be the harshest judges of other people, and they're going to be stagnant. And because they're stagnant and frustrated, frustration doesn't lead to better decision, generally speaking, right? And now you go and vote for the person who's going to make you feel better, just like you were saying. Not the person that necessarily is going to make your life better. It's the person going to make you feel better about your life, right? And so all the problems are outside of yourself. It's not that, you may be less educated or more educated. It's not that you may have been born in a city that has a lot more commerce, right? And so your chances to succeed are a lot higher than growing up in a smaller place where there's not that much traffic. Like there is so many factors outside of your own ability that come into play that to me is like silly, like to take all the credit for it or all the fault for anything, right? And I think that it to be a big switch into the ability to understand and our value, our shortcomings, and the ability to love ourselves through all of those. Because if you can love yourself through all of those, you don't need external validation of a leader, right? You can actually have a better understanding of the people that are talking to you, and you can hopefully make better decisions about the people that are carrying some value with them, that not just blowing smoke.
Yeah, I think that in terms of male psychology, the bias is towards, in the primitive part of the brain, it's towards that narrow strip definition of maleness, right? Very narrow. And in that narrow strip, it's very chimpanzee. So the reality of the chimpanzee brain is over millions and millions of years, you are either in charge or you are under threat of ostracism or being killed by your own group. That's the reality. Ostracism, being down at the bottom of the fucking ladder, or for one reason or another, the end of you and your genetic line by killing you. Okay, that's the reality. So it's not any wonder why we might have somebody, let's say there's a tendency in conservative psychology, which I think is true, to be attracted to that narrowness and the primitivism, because that's often through culture what is passed on. That you have two choices. Your choice is you can be in that bingo game of you're at the bottom of the ladder, you're ostracized or you're killed, or you can get to the other place where you don't have to really deal with that. Because maybe you and two other chimpanzees have a coalition and you're the ones that you're not going to be eating the shit sandwiches. That's everybody else. And if you're desperate and depressed and you didn't have a great relationship with your father and you weren't shown another way, that game is the only game that really attracts you. It's what you relate to. So you're interested in that game. And if you bring nuance into that game, you don't like it. It's confusing. Your neurochemicals want to get your dopamine and everything wants to get you addicted to being inside of this narrow game. It reinforces constantly with you. Perhaps it gives you more reinforcement than a person who has a nuanced and wide version of masculinity where you're not quite getting the dopamine spikes as much. It can be, I would imagine, an addictive process to be so tied into this narrow game. So we can see why people would fall into that or fall from that. Even if you add, okay, I'm not going to be the top chimpanzee, but I'm going to ass kiss up to that top chimpanzee. And that's also going to get me some good dopamine. And it's also going to keep me in the good graces. And I'm not going to be in this game down here where the chimpanzees are getting ostracized and whatever. You can see that, right? The other thing I wanted to add in is if we add in the hierarchy, this guy is a linguist, I believe, and I think he does social psychology also. George Laikoff from Berkeley. Now, I don't agree with Laikoff because he's basically a leftist and like kind of espouses communism a little bit, but he's come up with some amazing things. And I only saw him bring this up once. I've never seen it in any of his papers, but in an interview, he brings up essentially the Christian white male hierarchy. And so this is why I call it Laikoff's hierarchy. So this is Laikoff's hierarchy. God is above man, as in a man. God is above man. Man is above woman. Man and woman are above child. Successful man is above the unsuccessful man. White man is above man of color. And straight man is above gay man. So all of that is that hierarchy. Now, what Laikoff's hierarchy is describing for us is the hierarchy that the Trump administration is serving. And the hierarchy that you brought up earlier, which is like they're trying to imprint a worldview onto everything else. This is their belief in what the legitimate worldview is. Maybe a few of those things are shifted around. I'm sure there are some Christo-fascist women out there that wouldn't exactly be cool with man being above woman, right? They might think more of it in like man and woman are equal, but all the other shit's fine, right? So this other hierarchy, it's like these two hierarchies are together somehow. This narrow band of masculinity chimpanzee hierarchy, right, is like superimposed over Laikoff's hierarchy, like the Christo-fascist hierarchy. And it is very psychologically rewarding for these people. And they don't even have to have that reality for that game to be playing. And oftentimes it's not like that. That's not reality fully, but it's in their brain and it's feeding it. And I think that's really important that we bring that up also when we're talking about male psychology, because you can see how much lack of inclusion for other kinds of maleness exists there, right? So the idea that a gay man isn't a man, which is bullshit. Gay men are men. Right? Period. Just that alone. Of course, it took us a long time to get to, all of these rights that we have enshrined are for men or for man when they were enshrined. But that was at a time where Black men weren't considered men or humans. So, we see this operation, right, inside of society. These people are still most definitely in an addiction process with that narrowness.